You are the pioneers. With your visions, your ideas, and your passion to make things better. And we are the ones who protect you from pitfalls. We are by your side whenever needed as a true fellow. Reliable, pragmatic, realistic. Together we make your product come alive. Imagine you enjoy improvement. Process fellows.
A very warm welcome to our webinar today, Too Busy to Improve. So today we will find out what are the challenges and hurdles to improve something within a project or an organization. And based on our long time experience of our complete team, we would like to present you our findings, our improvement proposals, and maybe our strategy to how to deal with that. Yeah, but before I hand over to my colleague Florian, I want to tell you a little bit about our company Process Fellows. Yeah, you can just see here our portfolio overview. So we mainly deal with spice and automotive spice topics, with different additional areas like cybersecurity, machine learning, mechanical and hardware engineering, and also other domains like medical device software. Most of these models are used in automotive domain. So the spice world here became much more complicated than a few years ago. But on the other side, this is a very good sign that this model seems to be really successful. So we can support you in implementing and of course also to understand these standards and to implement them in a smart way, hopefully. With our services, our four main services, assessments, consulting, coaching, and training, we try to support you implementing those standards, not only by telling you what is written in the standards, but really to do hands-on coaching together with your colleagues, with your engineers, with your managers, to understand and to do the things on your own in a short time. Yeah, one part is our training portfolio. Here you can see the next upcoming trainings. Most of them are dealing with spice topics. Maybe you have heard that since October this year, the training portfolio changed within Intex. It's not only that there is a provisional and a competent assessor training, like mentioned here, but we offer now trainings for all these topics like machine learning, like hardware engineering, and so on. And if you're interested how this new version of Automotive Spice with all the new training architectural modules looks like, you can also have a look on our webpage in the webinar area. A couple of months ago, we presented also this new training architecture. And if you're interested, just contact us and we would be happy to teach and discuss with you these topics. Okay, now for the webinar here, some small rules. It would be great if you stay muted during the presentation. It's not forbidden to unmute, but of course it's easier to handle if you stay muted. And if you have questions, just use the F&A or Q&A area here in the Teams app. Just raise your question. At the end of the presentation, I will go through your questions and Florian tries to answer them. Please note that the webinar will be recorded, so even after this presentation, it will be available on our webpage for those who are not able today to attend. Also, the slides will be published on the webpage too, of course. Okay, let's head over to our presenter today, Florian Schmitt. Florian is one of our automotive spice assessors. Currently, he's a provisional assessor, not as most of our other colleagues, but this is the positive thing. He is focusing on the hands-on topic, not performing mainly assessments, but really doing the job, supporting the projects and trying to explain them how to do it in a practical way. He's also a Volkswagen certified software quality improvement leader, though this is a very special role defined by Volkswagen to support suppliers in achieving a certain quality. And he's also very familiar with agile frameworks. Is also certified Scrum Master and Safe4 certified Agilist, and an expert in many topics, mainly in the implementation of methods in the ALM area and also project management. So that's, I would say, all from my side. I would like to hand over to you, Florian. So the stage is yours.
Thank you, Bernhard. So let me start sharing my screen and jump to here. Okay, so hopefully now you see my screen. So welcome everybody. I'm Florian. I would like to start explaining you a situation I faced in a project, and this situation was really the root cause for me to start thinking about that topic, and in the end, this led to this webinar today. There is this company. I was there as a consultant, so did a classical ASPICE consultant's job there, helping this team improve and getting projects done in a better way, let's say. And they basically had two major projects running. They had, an electronics development department. They had a software team, they had hardware developers and a systems team, and they basically worked on two major projects, somehow related to each other because they were for the same customer. The one was a bit later in development, the other one was earlier. And what they did was they moved the team around depending on where the need was higher, because actually the team was a little too small for getting everything done in parallel to each other. So when in the one project there was an ASPICE assessment upcoming, they moved the team more to there, and they provided a lot of preparation workload. So the assessor was happy in the end. After that, testing in the other project was more important because that was almost SOP. So they moved the team over to there. And that was the situation. So far, for a consultant, more or less daily business, nothing too exciting because we see that pretty often. The interesting thing was in this situation where actually they had too few people for getting both projects covered, they took a decision to take a third project and to start a third project for a different customer. And this third project was even way more, it was bigger. It was a lot of, it was way more project budget. So that was really tremendous project. It was more complex. It was a different product family as well. And they started this third project in this situation. And that made me wonder, why would you do that? Why would you, overload your team even more that is actually already in a critical workload situation? And why do you take this decision to start this third project? And this is now one example, but in the end, this is not the only case where I personally or also my colleagues see such situations where such decisions are taken to start additional projects, even though the organization is already not really able to cope with the currently running ones. And that made me think. And what made this so interesting for me was that I am actually pretty sure there must be a reason that someone takes this decision and thinks it is a good idea. I don't think that it's actually totally obvious that this is dumb and completely idiotic. And why would you do that? Because there is so many people taking such decisions, and there must be a reason behind. And that was where I started the journey, which brings us to today. For this webinar, I would like to start with a small root cause analysis. So my analysis for the root causes why these situations exist. I would like to spend a few words on effects that we see that happen in such a situation. And then I would like to come up with a few conclusions and recommendations. I think this will probably take between 35 and 45 minutes, roughly. I am hoping that after that we will have a lively discussion, because for me it's also an important point today that I want to learn about your expectations or experiences and your view on that situation. You guys from our customers or from interested parties, I'm really also interested in exchanging here, and I'm looking forward to that second part of the webinar. So let's start with this root cause analysis. First of all, I want to take the perspective of an R&D leader who is the one deciding that projects are taken or not taken. And from the perspective of an R&D leader or a manager, let's just simply say manager, there is this law. It's called Parkinson's law, and that's an important factor for taking such a decision. Mr. Parkinson, we see him here on the right. So that's not the guy who has anything to do with the disease. This guy is a British historian. He worked for the British Navy. Died about 30 years ago, and he did several known works on organizational psychology things. And one of his laws, the Parkinson's law, reads out like, work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. So that means you will need as long for a task as you have time for it, right? And this is something I, from my personal life, can definitely agree to. When I need to prepare, for example, this webinar, then I will be done preparing it when I need to be done, but not 2 weeks earlier, because that's just how it goes. And let's transform that onto a development team. If you have a development team and you give that team as long time as basically unlimited, then this team will definitely need longer to get the work done than if you put this team under pressure. And in consequence, that means actually it is a good idea from a manager's perspective to keep a team under pressure until a certain degree. And this is an important factor that we need to take into account when it comes to analyzing why you always typically slightly overload your team. That's exactly this effect, that this makes your team more productive. And this is what I want to come up here with this little excursion to Mr. Parkinson and this Parkinson's law. I would like to jump to goal setting next. So that's the second part of this analysis. We need to understand the motivation behind this manager, why he takes his decisions on taking projects, not taking projects, and moving resources to projects. So that's about goals, because every manager, every employee basically is following certain, or let's say he's basing his decisions on goals that he's actually following. We will also have a slide look into the theory here. But by the way, there's a few slides here on theoretical issues, but after that we are going to come to a more practical view. So that's actually one of the last theoretical slides here. Goal setting is one of the renowned works of Locke and Latham. So also two pretty renowned psychologists. And they came up with this theory about setting goals. Goals must be challenging. So if you give your employee a goal, or if an employee sets a goal for himself, then it's a good idea that this is really an ambitious goal, which you really need to stretch for to get it done, but it should be somewhat realistic. That's basically the message from Locke and Latham. And typically you divide goals up into long-term goals, mid-term goals, and short-term goals. So basically we have long-term goals and then we transform that into mid-term goals and so on. A long-term goal typically is something like a common vision for everyone. So a long-term goal typically belongs to an organization. So let us directly come to an example for such a long-term goal. This is the long-term goal of SpaceX. SpaceX has the defined long-term goal that they want to make human people living on the Mars until 2030, I think, is the original goal. I don't know if they have updated this goal so far, but that was the original vision of SpaceX. We want to make human people continuously living on Mars. So that's an example for a long-term goal. Transforming long-term goals into mid-term goals typically results in so-called OKRs, objectives and key results, and they are going to be also important for us in the next step then of this analysis, because OKRs are a really important instrument to drive management in nowadays organizations. And OKRs then again are the input for short-term goals where you really plan in detail for your organization. What are the goals for the next quarter, for example? Yeah, so this is then really the next detailed level where you really base your concrete project work on. And this overall structure here is how typically goal setting is done in modern business organizations and in automotive industry as well. The thing with OKRs, so now coming back to this second level here, is let us say you achieve less than 70% of your OKRs that are defined for you. So let us say you are now a manager, like an R&D leader, and your manager again has defined OKRs for you for your next year. Yeah, and if you achieve less than 70% of that, well, that's okay. Yeah, that's quite a good result, let's say. Yeah, so that's not bad. If you achieve up to 80% of it, then this is absolutely perfect. Yeah, this is like the optimum result. And the interesting thing is, let us say you would achieve over 80%, then actually the outcome, the result would be that your manager says, well, apparently we have not had goals for you which are ambitious enough. Yeah, this is how business is working, unfortunately, from my perspective. Yeah, so this is not only my personal opinion. This is research, which is happening on that. But in the end, this is what practically is happening for managers nowadays. You are a manager, you get certain goals you should strive for the next year, and actually it's not possible to really get them done, but you try. And typically you end up somewhere in this corridor between 70 and 80% if you do a very good job. That's the real life story behind OKRs in the end. I just want to shortly introduce you guys to these two here, because we are going to use the two personas here. On the left side, we have Sarah. Sarah is a salesperson in an R&D organization, and Donnie is the R&D leader. So Donnie is the development leader. And we want to now look onto what these two guys have as goals in this overall picture, in this big picture of an organization. Sarah is the salesperson. So her goal is she wants to sell as many projects as possible, full stop. This is how her success is measured. Yeah, and that's basically a simple story. For Donnie, the developer, he is following the goal that he must make it happen that as many projects as possible can be done. So in consequence, you could say he must make his R&D department capable of serving as many projects as possible at the same time. This is, for example, the root cause behind variant management. Yeah, that you say, okay, I don't want to start from scratch. I want to be able to really have a portfolio of product families, and with as less effort as possible, get satisfying products for my for my customers into the market with high quality. Yeah, just be efficient and be able to serve as many projects as possible. So this is the goals of these two. Let us look now into the motivations of Donnie, our development leader. Yeah, and let's do a more detailed investigation why Donnie would take his decisions as an R&D manager. Motivations, that's the one side of the game. The other one then will be challenges, but let's start with motivations. A factor for Donnie to decide if to take a project is Parkinson's law, as we explained already. Yeah. The thing is, as an R&D leader, you are measured by the number of projects that you are doing in parallel with your R&D team. So you're measured, your personal success as a manager is measured by this number typically. And that means you have a certain motivation to take projects, because refusing projects is it's actually nothing which would be rewarded for your role as an R&D leader. It's something, yeah, well, actually the expectation is that you as an R&D leader accept projects and make them happen then in consequence. What you want to do as an R&D leader, of course, is make the customer happy. And this also comes in consequence with you don't want to refuse a customer who is asking you to do a project for him. Yeah, because you don't know if this customer would come back, if he would accept like a delay, or if he would come back with the next product then in a year or two. So you want to make your customer happy, and you actually don't want to refuse a customer. And therefore, you typically do something like like sugarcoating. Yeah, if you are thinking about the factors that make you decide if to take the project or not to take the project, then typically you apply purposeful optimism. You think, yeah, well, we are gonna make it happen somehow. And one additional factor, yeah, if we think back about this slide with OKRs for this developer, for our Donny here, let's say he is doing a great job and makes this 80% happen. Yeah. The next challenge for him will be the year after. These goals will rise again. Yeah, that's the typical game that is played. And therefore, it becomes even more difficult for him in the next year to achieve his goals. And in consequence, that is another motivation factor for him to take the projects. Let's look into challenges for Donny. So an important thing to take into account is to really have the data available to base a decision on is a hard job for an R&D leader. It really is. Yeah, I've talked to multiple managers and people who are in higher managing roles in several automotive domains during the last 1 or 2 years about this topic, because I'm really interested in this topic, and they say, well, Florian, if you have something like 70% of the information available that you actually need to take a decision, then this is a luxury situation. Typically, you have way less of the actually needed information to take the decision. So it's really hard to base decisions on realistic factors, because typically you don't have a lot of information available. So let us try to transform that onto a real life scenario. If you have a request from some of your customer, and they want to start a really cool new product, yeah, and you should do the development for them, then you will not be able to explorate that from historical data from previous projects, but you will have to take really assumptions like, okay, so we have never done this. Let us assume it takes us 20% more time to get all the problems fixed. And you see directly here, it's really hard to estimate that and to make it realistic. And that is an important challenge that we need to address and that we need to understand when we want to understand why Donny is taking a decision. Steering is hard. If you decide today that you want to take the project and to support your organization, you will also hire some external developers, and you plan to hire a few internal people in addition. Yeah. So random scenario now. That's really hard because you don't know precisely about the workload in a few months. You don't know if it's really working to get people hired. You don't know how long it takes you to get them productive. You need to take into account an onboarding phase and this ramp up phase for people until they are really getting this productive. You really need to plan in a long run. Yeah, so it's not that you decide today, okay, I just increase my headcount and then everything is working in a linear way. It's way more complicated. Yeah, and therefore steering an organization as an R&D leader is really also a complicated issue and a hard job. Coming back to this scaling it all, it's that's pretty a no-brainer today. It's really hard to find people you can hire, and therefore, even if you have a lot of work and a lot of interested customers, you cannot scale your team in the same way that you potentially would have work scaling or project scaling. That's really hard, especially if you want to come to qualified, motivate, good people, then they are not really waiting on the road for you to hire them. Yeah, that's just actually a pretty easy story nowadays. And that's also an additional challenge for every R&D leader. And something I already talked about, actually, you don't want to refuse your customer. Yeah, you are motivated to make your customer happy. You actually don't want to reject them. I want to come up here with a so-called causal loop diagram for a minute, because this is a good option to visualize all these effects and these loops in between these factors. So let me shortly, 1 second. Here we are. So let me explain that a little bit. I just want to focus here on some of these loops. Let me shortly explain about the origin of this diagram here. This is coming from a academic paper about an organization called Webvan. Webvan was an online commercial store about, meanwhile, 25 years ago. They went bankrupt at some point, and the reasons behind that were subject to a lot of academic research at some point. From one of these papers, I took this loop diagram here because it actually perfectly reflects what we want to discuss here today, and that's why we are going to come to that. I just explained that because that's also the reason why here, for example, we have e-grocery, because basically Webvan was a grocery store. So let's start somewhere. Let's say we start here. And let's just understand here the dependencies of the factors to each other. We have service quality. Yeah, if we have more service quality, then our value to the customer is rising. Yeah, we have here a dependency of a positive dependency, more service quality, more value to the customer. More value to the customer would mean more orders. Yeah, because our customers are happy, they will have more orders for us. More orders, again, will mean we have more things to do at the same time. So in consequence, our service quality will probably decrease. Yeah? More orders would mean we have a higher amount of cash flow in our company. We have just more money we earn. And that, again, can be used for making our organization more capable of creating value. So again, here, more cash, more value creation capacity. And based on that, with a certain delay, we can increase our service quality again and build even better projects, or make better projects, build better products. Yeah, I just wanted to come up with this graph here today because I find this is a good visualization of these dependencies between all these factors. Because when I was thinking about that, I really found that helpful. So I would just keep that for a second so you can read it in and take your time here. Okay, and then I would jump on and would come up with a question again. Yeah, so we have now spoken about the motivations and the goals of a manager. Every manager, no matter if it's Sarah, the salesperson, or Donnie, the developer, they all want to make their organization successful, of course. Yeah. And the question is, in the end, how would you decide what is success for your organization on a global level, and how would you measure that? And based on measuring it, how would you incentivize the decisions of your managers then? Yeah. So here we are now looking down from the high level to your organization. And try to understand how do we actually make our organization as successful as possible. And I want to come up here just with a few proposals or options you could use for measuring your global success. And I hope that I can also provocate here a little discussion afterwards, because I think there is not the one truth how to decide which global success factors there are and how you measure them, but everybody needs to decide that on their own. Yeah. So here are the options. We could say, well, we have a well-filled order backlog, and therefore we have enough work for the next 3 years. Actually, we cannot even take more orders from the customers, or we should not, because they will have to wait that long. So that could be one option how we would measure if we are successful. Or we could measure just the turnover per year from our company, pretty simple. Or rather from turnover, we could also focus to our EBIT, just the money we win, the money we earn, after taking out all the costs. Or a little bit a different perspective, we could focus on, are our projects actually running in time? Do we get our products delivered punctual? Or we could say, what is the degree of faulty returns from the field? So we are a great successful organization because what we bring to the market, we don't have problems with it. Could be an option how we could decide if we are successful. Or we could also say, well, we ask our internal employees if they love their jobs, and that is a factor for us to make our organization successful. I think this last one is more important than you think in the first moment, because we are living in an industry where skilled and experienced people are very valuable, and it's really hard to replace people if they are unhappy and decide to leave an organization. I read some academic research on that topic, and the number these guys come up with is, if you lose a person in a team, then it will typically take you something like 1.5 of the yearly salary of that person to replace that person. So the assumptions or the analysis results they have is, they say, well, you have a gap in your team. That's the first factor. You need to find a sufficient replacement. That takes time, and it typically takes also money to hire someone who is doing that for you. Once you have that person, you need to onboard that person. Onboarding again takes effort from other available people in your team, because they need to train that person. And all in all, the calculation they came up with results in something like 1.5 times the yearly salary of that person who leaves. So it is actually pretty expensive to lose people in a team, more than you actually would think maybe. And therefore, keeping your team happy is crucial nowadays from my perspective. Also today in a situation where many organizations are going through challenging times, maybe even more than that, it's really important to keep your people and keep them motivated and happy with their jobs. So that's a few of my proposals or options I came up with here, how you could measure success. Let's come back to that later in the discussion, hopefully. I want to talk about the concept of flow, and I want to ask, what is actually a good workload for your team? I came up here with another example which we can use as an analogon here, which is traffic on a road. We use that now just as similar to the workload of a team in terms of getting tasks done, working on tickets. 100% workload looks like that. We have jam. It's actually not most efficient because there is just the workload is just too high. This is what a road with 100% load looks like. However, a road with 50% load looks like that, and this is actually something like, there could be more traffic here, and nobody would lose time. So here, that's maybe a little bit inefficient, and I think that the optimum point is somewhere in between. And also academic research says something like 70 to 80% of workload is an optimum, because there you have flow. And I also can really agree to that from my practical experience in projects. You should not plan your teams with 100% of the available capacity, because it's not working in the end. And it reduces the option for the team to self-organize, to improve. That's why I always recommend something like 75 to 80% of workload. And I found here that research is agreeing to that. This is actually the most efficient thing. Yeah, so coming back to our original question, that would also mean overloading is actually not efficient. And overloading is the focus of our next slide here. And we want to see here a little bit what is actually these effects that you have when you are having an overload situation in your team. So when we say here overload, then I mean this typical project situation. You have milestones ahead. You have a lot of development work to be done until then, and actually it's pretty challenging that you get the milestone achieved. So the first effect that you would have in this then is you reduce the work to the things that are really necessary. Yeah, so you do just the feature development. You try to have working software. If it's properly tested or if there is reviews done, is maybe not as important anymore if you come to this overload situation, because what you need to do is deliver to your customer. And therefore you strip it down to the bare minimum. That's a typical effect that you have in an overload situation. Which means in consequence, you will build up so-called technical debt. Yeah, you will not optimize your architecture anymore because that should be done, but we don't have time for it right now. So we put it into the backlog, and at some point we are going to do it. Yeah, that's a typical thing we see every day. And in consequence, then often we see something like, I call it here special effects. What I mean here is we have strange behavior in our product. Yeah, we have a strange noise, but we don't know exactly where it's coming from. We need to do detailed analysis, and we have problems that are not easy to solve in a late project situation typically. So yeah, I see that a lot in C-sample phases, 3 months to SOP, and we have really important issues which are strange, which cannot be resolved easily, and we have a high time pressure. And yeah, that's what I mean here with special effects. Plus, a typical special effect I also see a lot is in such a situation that we have right now, we have special effects like the system architect leaves for paternal leave, or someone very important in the project becomes sick for 4 weeks or something like that. Yeah, it's just in this overload vicious circle here, we become less robust towards such special effects, and then they have a way higher influence. Yeah, they have a great impact then. So now we come to a situation where we as a project manager somewhere need to tell our customer, dear customer, we are really sorry. We do what we can, but we cannot make the milestone. So we need to shift the milestone. And often, from my experience, I would say customers are constructive. And when you come up with this first time, often it's not a big deal. Yeah, so they are not happy, but they understand and they say, okay, so we understand we need to shift the milestone. We can also live with the samples being available 4 weeks later. But please do your homework and come up with a plan how you want to update the overall schedule. And when we get our project done, SOP is not negotiable, and the later important releases, we need to catch up until then. Yeah, that's what typically happens when this first milestone shift is coming up, and you cannot play that often as a supplier. Yeah, so you can do that once, maybe you can do that twice, but at some point you will risk that you lose the trust of your customer. Then you come into different problems even. So with these quality issues, milestones shifted, we have now a situation, we deliver samples to the customer, the customer tests them and comes back and says, well, it's not working as expected. And you say, yeah, well, actually we knew, we delivered the samples to you, but we are working on it, dear customer. Yeah, we are right now we are in the analysis, and we actually are already working on the fix. And this is how this game is often played. And at some point, when the customer is really not satisfied anymore, then customer starts micromanaging you. So he will really have a closer monitoring. Extremer examples from our experience as consultants, where we support projects. We have had project managers in the last months where they told us, well, basically the customer needs us to report something like twice a day. Once, I think that's the most extreme example that I can tell you about. That was a project manager. We did an assessment there, and the project manager showed us his schedule, and he showed us that he has customer meetings in a range of 38 hours a week, just customer meetings. And of course, it's pretty obvious that how will you do your job then as a project manager? So you are just having the customer sitting next to you all the time, and that's actually a more negative factor in the end, because that provides a lot of more effort. And that's the next step then in this vicious cycle I try to visualize here. In the end, all of that will lead to a late product, which is not fulfilling the desired degree of quality. So you have an unhappy customer, and at the same time, your own team is being burned out and exhausted. And this is what we see in reality pretty often in such an overload situation, and that's why I want to really strongly indicate here that's something we must avoid at all costs. Because if you are in this situation, then the way is not so long anymore until it really becomes critical for your organization. Because often the most critical thing is not the customer. Often what I saw in the last years, the critical thing is your own team, where you lose people, and it's always the best people who go first. I have seen organizations die because of that. They started with such an overload situation, fast forward 2 years later, there were not many developers there anymore at all, and they could not handle additional new project anymore because there was nobody there anymore. And basically these companies are not working anymore today. I saw that really in the last 5 years, and that also it's sad because it could have been avoided. That's really practical experience that I have seen. Let us take all that we have talked about so far and bring that in a broader context here. Why is that not an option for us? And everything I talked about so far is a challenge on its own, but I think we also need to take into the loop here the trends that we have in our industry at the moment. And one of the core trends is the complexity of our products is rising way faster than our productivity. We can, if we look onto the project, onto the products, I think that's also something everybody will agree on. If you have a car from today and you have a car from, let's say, 2010, the complexity, both in a feature-driven view and also in a architectural view onto a vehicle from today, that's a different story. The amount of software complexity in a vehicle is tremendous nowadays, and we are not at the end of that. It's increasing more and more. And just shortly indicating all these trends that we need to cope in our industry today. That's all things that are happening in every organization nowadays. That's all things that we need to cope with, and we need to have the time and the capability to get all these things into our organization. We need to learn how to do that because it's a must. We need to be able, for example, just taking out one of these now, over-the-air capabilities we see here on the left side, on the right side here. That's actually mandatory nowadays because of cybersecurity context. And we need to be able to have now products who are supporting that. And that's just one random example out of this. All of these are really important, and you will not be able to cope with all of them if you're overloaded all the time. So this is the goal. We need to go up there because we need to learn all these things, and we need to be capable of handling all that aspects. And we are here, and we need to go up there. And the next aspect here is, once we are up there and we have achieved the summit, the next summit is upcoming. Yeah, so this is what we need to do with our organization, and this is when we are the leaders as managers, then we need to be aware of that. That's my opinion. And in consequence, if we stay with this picture here, then asking what kind of people we need for the job, yeah, that's the next step then. And yeah, well, it's pretty simple. Do you want to go up the summit with this guy, or do you need these guys here? Yeah, I think that's also pretty simple actually, but in the next step, then it's an important factor for us taking the decisions. So let's come to the conclusions for my talk. What are the takeaways? Well, first of all, I want to say really, I want to not blame only the R&D managers. It's not that only the managers are taking poor decisions and everybody from the organization has to follow because that guys are just greedy and they need to do it like that. Yeah, I think we need to really understand these mechanisms. That's why I tried to explain them a little bit, and we need to understand that also these managers are in this mechanism game. Yeah, so they also have these reasons to take these decisions. And if we want to address that from the organization perspective, that's the first aspect here. Then I would really recommend that we discuss about what I addressed a little bit earlier as well. What actually is our global optimum for our organization? How do we measure success? Yeah, and this is something, from my opinion, this must be implemented top down. Yeah, this is something that needs to come from the top management, and this is nothing you can implement in your organization with a grassroots approach. Yeah, if you discuss this global optimum and these mechanisms with goal setting and so on, then you need to come from the top in the end. My recommendation would be, if you are in this management game here, then really try to analyze in your organization, what are these KPIs? How are the roles of the managers measured, the success of these people? That's a really powerful instrument. Yeah, KPIs which are measuring your organization is really underestimated from my perspective. And it's valuable to invest a bit of time into this analysis. A recommendation from my end, if you think about these things, something I find promising is measure what you want to avoid. Yeah, for example, measure how is the sick leave averages in your team, or for example, milestone trend analysis. How often do we need to reschedule? Yeah, measure what you want to avoid. That's a promising instrument if you want to improve your organization. So that's the management perspective. If you are now this poor guy, the project manager who needs to somehow get this project working in this situation that I discussed now in this talk, fight for the resources you need and get the job done. Yeah, in this situation, it's not about root cause analysis and improving the organization. In this situation, you will have each bit of energy you have, you will need for surviving and getting the project done. Yeah, and fight for the resources you need. Escalate to your management, but not too early. If you escalate too early, then you will somehow lose the ear of your manager, because you're always the one who is saying it's I cannot do it, it's too hard. Yeah? But if you escalate too late and the manager cannot react anymore, then it's also your fault. So you're always the person who is in this poor situation. Then as a project manager, it's really it's an art actually to find this right point of time where you escalate to your management. And now that's really now my personal perspective. Yeah, try to protect yourself. I'm always a fan of being transparent to your manager, to your team, to your customer. I think mid-term and long-term, that's always the better option than just promising something you actually know is not working. Yeah, and from my perspective, this is really working better if you are just honest with everybody and you say, sorry, this is the situation, this is my plan, will not work directly, but yeah, this is the roadmap. Yeah, I find that more promising. and keep the trust of your team alive. That's I wanna close here with a story where I really learned something in there, where I was really impressed. I did an assessment, meanwhile a year ago, something like that. And in this assessment, we talked about project management in this interview. They had too few people out of special occasions. And their manager, in this case, it was the R&D leader that was also part of this interview, and he came up with a presentation and showed to us some slides, and he explained, so this is why we are in this situation, and this is the analysis we came up with, this is the decisions we took, and this is the roadmap. We are going to hire these concrete 5 people next month with names. They are going to join the team, and in 3 months' time, then we will hire additional people from that company, and they will also support us. And at this point of time, we are going to be back to our plan again. And I said, that's really, thank you for showing that. That's really convincing, and I'm really, happy with that, and really impressed by this. So you convinced me that you know what you're doing. And he said, yeah, well, thank you, but for me, it's not important to convince you. For me, it's important to convince my team that I understood the situation and the pain they are in, and that I am doing the measures that it takes to get the problem solved and get back to a normal mode again. And that's a positive example, which I want to close my talk with now. I think we all should strive for being like that. And with that now, I would close my part of that. I'm now really eager on your questions and on the discussions.
Thank you very much, Florian, for this inspiring presentation. Okay, so is there any question here from the audience? I hope we do not only had engineers here in our audience panel, but also some managers. And if not, of course, then just advise your managers, maybe to have a look to the webinar on our webpage to also get some insights, and hopefully they will understand the challenges Florian was explaining during the last hour.
So Florian, I had one question, and based on what I heard from you, it seems like the management team and everybody has access to the right set of data. My worry that I have seen is not just that you don't have goals, or you don't have objectives, or you don't have the pressure of delivering on time and all that, but more often than not, 2 points that I have seen is, one, even if the data is, or the metrics or the points that they need to worry about is available, they don't have time and bandwidth to even look at it, or they're not even worried about looking at it because they have different priorities. So the target and the objectives that the organization is tracking, somehow during implementation of a project, they get diluted because of the priorities that they are facing from a customer endpoint. Have you seen these scenarios in practicality?
Let me start with the first part of your question. Analyzing the data. Let me use 2 sentences on that. When I started about these thoughts, and in consequence, I decided that I want to talk about it at some point. Actually, there was no context for me for automotive spice at this point. I thought this is actually an organizational change topic and basically a project management topic. And when I really then thought about why is that and what are the mechanisms, at some point I realized this KPI thing and decision taking thing and metrics thing in the end is something that's exactly the goal of implementing automotive spice, and not only on level 4 and 5, but also before. Then having all of this makes your organization robust and predictable. So in consequence, at some point in my preparation, I realized, well, actually somehow automotive spice is part of the answer to the questions I rose, and that was actually not what I planned when I started. Having metrics available typically nowadays, I would say, is easier than it was a few years ago. So the world is becoming more complex, yes. But nowadays, where you have so many integrated tool landscapes with something like Power BI and ALM tools and stuff, actually deriving the metrics often is not the big challenge. I think the more critical thing is the second aspect that you mentioned. If actually management is not interested in them, yeah, then we have a different question. But I think getting these metrics is feasible, and it's an important aspect. Yeah, you cannot improve what you cannot measure. That's something a former colleague of me always said 5 years ago, and somehow I tend to agree to the statement. If your management is not interested in metrics, but is following just their own philosophy and gut feeling, that's a different topic. But so it's also probably different to the focus of this talk today. I would then really be willing, or I would be interested in discussions with these people. What actually is their measure of success? So what is their goals, and what is actually what they want to achieve? Because if they just say, well, yeah, I don't know if that's really a good basis for taking decisions as a manager in an organization, but maybe there's more behind. Yeah, and that's again what I said in the very beginning. I think often there is more behind than you see as the consumer of these decisions. Yeah? So all of that in the end would have to be discussed with the managers. But if they are not interested in all of that, that's a difficult situation, definitely.
Thanks, Florian. So maybe there's time for one last question. No? Okay, then let me thank you again for your participation. We are a little bit over time, but I think it was a very interesting topic presented by Florian. So as announced in the beginning, you can find the recording and also the slides in a couple of days on our webpage. You can use them, you can forward them to your managers or to your colleagues, of course, and we would be happy to see you again. So thank you very much for your participation. Thank you, Florian, for your presentation, and hope to see you soon again.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You are the pioneers. With your visions, your ideas, and your passion to make things better. And we are the ones who protect you from pitfalls. We are by your side whenever needed as a true fellow. Reliable, pragmatic, realistic. Together we make your product come alive. Imagine you enjoy improvement. Process Fellows.